with defensive firearms instruction. As a firearms instructor, I very frequently get asked what specific type of firearms I run and how did I set those firearms up. So today I'd like to talk about the firearm that I find myself running on a fairly regular basis and some of the additions and accessories that I put with this firearm. I'd like to start out with the firearm itself. This firearm is a Glock 21 and is chambered in 45 ACP. I really like Glocks for a couple of different reasons. First of all, the simplicity. Glocks are great. Essentially they are kind of like the Toyota of the gun world. They're very accurate. There's not a lot of moving parts, and the probability of a weapons malfunction is pretty low as long as you're maintaining it fairly regularly. I do like striker fire weapon systems. I like the consistent trigger pull. I've spent a lot of time with SIG 226s and Beretta M9s, and having one consistent trigger pull has definitely assisted me a lot with my first shot. As far as some of the upgrades that I've done, I think one of the most important upgrades that you can do on your firearm is your sights. With the sight that I chose, I decided to go with the Ameriglo iDot Pros. The Ameriglo iDot Pro is a really good sight, and the reason that I chose it had a lot to do with the front sight. Now the front sight, if you're looking at it during the daytime, it really almost glows orange. It does have a tritium insert, and so during low light situations it is going to glow green, but it's really nice to be able to have that front sight that's very easy to see and catch when I'm aiming at my targets or engaging multiple targets. The other thing that I really kind of liked is that rear sight. It does have one small dot, so I can line up the front sight and the rear sight fairly quickly and easily, and I'm already used to that type of a sight system, especially going back to my days in the Marine Corps with a Beretta M9 in the post and dot setup. The other thing that I kind of like about the design on the front of the rear sight, it's got a really nice ledge. And the ledge actually gave me the ability to cycle my slide off of my belt or the back of a boot, or work weapons malfunctions. Another addition that I did in this region is grip tape. I ended up putting 3M skateboard tape in front of the sight and behind the chamber. And the reason I did that is it adds just a little bit more texture. If I needed to cycle it off of a belt or something else like that, it's going to catch a little bit easier as opposed to having this be completely slick. As far as the sights are concerned, there's a lot of different types of sights out there. I try to stay away from the sights that are angled right in front because it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to, use this in multiple different settings. The next thing I upgraded was the barrel. I really like Lone Wolf. They ship out really, really quick. This particular barrel is extended and threaded, so I can run a suppressor if I really want to. The silver finish is really kind of nice when I'm cleaning my firearm. And the reason it's nice is because I can see the carbon buildup, whereas if I had a barrel that was blued, it might be a little bit more difficult for me to see some of the carbon buildup that I missed while I was cleaning my firearm. The other things that I had done was a extended magazine release. This extended magazine release specifically is from Tango Down. Previously I was running a Gen 3 Glock, and it has a smaller magazine release, and it does have kind of sharp edges, especially if you get the extended magazine releases. This particular magazine release is contoured a little bit, and it's raised in just the right spot, so it's not very large, but it definitely helps out when I'm releasing my magazine, for having just that little bulge right there. The other thing that I ended up doing is I upgraded the slide lock. Yet again, I went through Tango Down. This slide lock has a really nice ledge. It doesn't kick out too far, but it's just wide enough to where I can catch it with my thumb if I needed to disengage the slide lock and get my slide all the way into battery. It also has a nice little angle right here, and it's got lacerations from left to right, which make it really easy to get a good contact with my thumb when I'm locking that slide to the rear. I think that's definitely a very, very cool design. Some of the other things that I ended up doing to this firearm is I upgraded the trigger. There's a lot of different types of trigger upgrades that you can get. The one that I particularly ended up with was the OC Custom triggers. I've got about 3 or 4 of the OC Custom triggers in some of the Glocks that I run. This particular one has a setup for about 3 pounds. The nice thing about OC Custom Triggers is it doesn't have a lot of over travel. They adjust really, really nice. It's got a very smooth pull, but a very crisp break. And yet again, the reset is just perfect. Very smooth, very easy to install, and it's just been a phenomenal trigger. The other thing that I ended up doing is I did a stippling job. I had my stippling job done for a couple of reasons. First of all, the finger grooves on the front of the Glocks have never really fit my hands all that great. You know, if the Gen 2s actually came with a light rail, I'd probably still be running one of those. However, I needed to get rid of that just so it was easier for me to get a good solid grip. The other thing that I look at as far as the stippling job is I want to have a little bit more texture to maintain control over my weapon. I think of it kind of like this. If I am shooting at, you know, a bad guy, and I'm aiming center of mass on him, and he's aiming center of mass on me, my hands are center of mass. So if I get shot in the hand, which is a very common wound for law enforcement that end up in shooting situations, I'm going to get blood on my gun. And if I get blood on my gun, my hands are going to slip around, my grip, my firearm's going to slip around on me. With this stippling job, it's actually going to help me out a lot with, you know, getting a good solid grip. Also, you know, as I'm shooting, my hands do get sweaty, and so, you know, this helps me maintain control over that a little bit better. Another thing that I also had done was I had the trigger guard undercut just a little bit to offset those edges, and that helps me get a higher tang grip. And then I had a secondary undercut done just in front of that, and so when I grab my firearm, I've got a good reference point for my support hand to go under. I also ended up doing a little bit of stippling right up here, and that's nice because when I have the firearm in my hand, I have that reference point below the trigger guard, but I also have a spot for my thumb to go back. If I have my hands in the same exact spot every single time, the probability of me maintaining a higher level of accuracy is going to be a lot easier. The last thing that I ended up doing as far as the firearm is adding a light. I think lights are really important. There's a lot of different types of lights out there. My personal favorite is the stream lights. I've been using stream lights for a number of years, and I like how robust and how tough they are. They can really take a beating. This particular one was a Streamlight TLR2S. This does have a strobing feature, which I think is a really nice benefit if I'm going to be in a defensive type situation. It's got a good amount of lumens that are coming out of this, and it's also running off CR123A batteries. I like having continuity between the batteries that are in my handgun in addition to the batteries that are in either my shotgun or my carbine. For some reason, if I'm using my rifle, if my batteries go out on an optic or a light, I can pull them from my handgun or vice versa, depending on what I'm going to end up doing. The TLR2S also comes with a laser feature. Considering the fact that I do occasionally run a suppressor on this, you can't always get a really good sight picture when you're using a suppressor, and so having this laser gives me a nice secondary sighting system at close range if I needed to use it for that. The other thing that I look at as far as lasers is it does have a nice psychological impact. If I am using my firearm for duty use or for work, in my opinion, it can, you know, assist me with de-escalating a situation without resorting to gunfire if, you know, there's that laser, you know, on the suspect. Some of the other things that I ended up doing to this particular firearm was the magazines. Now, with a Glock 21, the standard magazine capacity is going to be 13 rounds, which in itself is a very good capacity for, you know, this type of a firearm. You know, I don't exactly plan on concealed carrying this firearm, but, you know, for more duty use and for range use, you know, having 13 rounds is definitely a good thing. I also decided to go for a Arredondo +5 magazine extension. There's a lot of opinions out there about magazine extensions, and there's a lot of different types of magazines magazine extensions out there. Going with the Arredondo, it is polymer, and I run, easily 500 or 600 rounds through each one of my magazines, and I really have not had any issues with this whatsoever, and it was very easy to install. 18 rounds in a 45 is a very respectable amount of ammunition. I think it's definitely a huge benefit. The other thing that I really kind of like about this is it has extra material down here, and so if my magazine for whatever reason got stuck on my firearm, it would be very easy for me to remove it by grabbing this to get it out of the firearm, which I think yet again is a huge benefit. Something else I've done with my magazines is I always number my magazines. I think that's a really good idea. There's a lot of reasons why a firearm would malfunction. I think that, a lot of it can come from the magazine. A lot of it can come from not maintaining your firearm properly. However, if I, spend about $600 or $700 on a firearm, and then I spend about $35 or $40 on a magazine, which one's going to go out first? Most likely the magazine. So if I start having weapons malfunctions, if I know this magazine is the one that I'm spending a lot more time dealing with malfunctions on, I can look into the magazine just a little bit further and maybe replace it or maintenance it or get it back into action. Having said that, this is just one of the platforms that I run. I really like this system. I definitely have a lot of other weapons that I run on a fairly regular basis, but this tends to be one of the ones that I spend a lot of time running on the range. Having said that, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. We've got our website, which is defensivefirearmsinstruction.org. If you want to sign up for a class, or if you're interested in any other types of reviews, please feel free to give us a shout, and we'd love to see you on one of our classes.